Our next guest of honor is widely recognized for his expertise in transforming organizations and empowering people. He is an ICF accredited coach, service veteran, UN peacekeeper, and speaker. He promotes a culture of being dispensable through identifying the right talent and building capability to create sustainability in organizations. He is passionate about people and helps them in enhancing their self awareness and presence so that they can identify and realize their full potential. He's all ready to set our screens on fire with his talk on build security in significance of threat modeling in building a DevSecOps culture. We are very excited to welcome amongst us Mr. Nivarti Jayaram.
Hi everyone, I'm Nivarti Jayaram, ICF accredited coach, currently with Society General as Head of Transformation. My upcoming book, Unlearning, will cover mostly on how you can be better in your coaching engagements. It's likely to be out by end of this month, and I am passionate about helping people and so that they can realize their full potential. So that's about me in short. And moving to the topic of the day, it's about threat modeling. So threat modeling and its significance in developing a DevSecOps culture in organizations and teams. So if we have to start with, so what is threat modeling? So threat modeling is a process by which potential threats can be identified, enumerated, and prioritized from a hypothetical attacker's point of view. So it's important to understand that threat modeling is more a proactive uh, identification of threats, and it is done from the perspective of the hypothetical hacker or attacker of the systems in the organization. So that's the viewpoint we bring in from where we look at the threats. Going to the next point, what is the purpose? Now we understand what is threat modeling and what is the purpose of threat modeling. As I said, it provides us the ability to defend our systems with a holistic analysis of the possible attacks are the profiles or the personas of people who are most likely to attack the systems we have, and also the assets we are building. When we say assets, it's also about the applications or the solutions that we are building for a certain group of people. And by continuously threat modeling, making this as a continuous process within the teams, so security, we can build a better security for organization than the current way of looking at security as a retrospective only when we are trying to undertake a pen testing or a security testing before deploying system into production, which means security is addressed more as a developmental effort, post development effort, than something which goes through a continuous process right from architecture through the process of application lifecycle development. So that is where threat modeling comes in very handy. And we will also see how we can build the culture of security building in, or build in security also into the enterprise through the use of threat modeling. Moving to the next aspect. So what are various types of threats that we look for? Now, one is internal versus external users. So who are your potential end users? And that can also define what kind of threats we can face. If your users are more internal, which is if it is internal facing application than it facing external end users, then possibly the kind of potential threats you might look for are more targeted for internal fraud or internal hacking by design or by intent or even by mistake. So that is something you can think about. And if you are looking at an application which is potentially used by external users, then again that brings in different types of threats that we look for potentially. The second, where the application is hosted. Now, whether it is hosted on internal systems or it is hosted on a public cloud, where it is, and it complements how it is used as well. So the first is who is using it, and potentially number two, where that particular application or system is hosted. We all know that if it is hosted on public cloud, generally the public cloud comes with its own set of security parameters and also security threats that it can bring into the system that we are developing. And if it is more internal, possibly it's more protected through the DMZs we have. So which means the potence of attack becomes a little lesser as compared to when it is hosted on public cloud. Now, again, the third type of threats that we look for is data. Data is today, is a key element or asset of most organizations, and we need to understand what are the data types and those sensitivities associated with the data types, which means what are the potential confidentiality ratings of the type of data that you have, and based on the confidentiality of the data and how the secrecy or confidentiality rating is assigned, it would have its own security parameters that brings into the system that we look for. And also what we mostly look at is securing the data when it is at rest in different uh, applications or databases where it is hosted. But what we also should look for when you are trying to develop threat models is securing the data when it is being in transit. That means when it is be moving from one system to another system, we potentially overlook this element of securing data while it is in transit, which is also a very important element to look at as part of threat modeling. Then again, it is whether the threats that we look for are more looking at the servers we host or kind of systems we build, or is it also could be from the type of code that is being exposed to. So those two elements, one is on the infrastructure end, integration, and the application layers that we look for. And if you are hosting something on certain platforms, then platform layers also come in for us to look at different types of threats proactively. Now, this one is mostly looked into how application can be more secure and the security for the code that is developed. This is the most in focus, kind of security area that we have today. We all look at when we are developing applications, we look at, okay, whether our code that we are going to put in production, is it secure enough? Whether the application layer is secure enough for the utilities that we are providing to the customers. That is something which we focus on, but all others also need to be looked into when you are actually potentially looking at threat modeling. So threats could come from all of these elements or one or more of these elements based on what is the type of solution that we are building. Now, different threat models that we have, there are n number of threat models, but I think the most mature, if you talk about today, is Stride. It is one of the most mature models that it is available in the market for us to use, but also it is very time consuming. And Pasta is another one, Lindun is another one. So there are threat models which we could use based on how our organization is structured and how what makes more sense for us to use and what is our focus area for us to use. So these are certain threat models: Stride, Pasta, Lindun, CVSS or security cards, and also you have vast modeling, Octave, these elements. Now we can use one or more of these based on what are the areas that we are looking at. Now, let's look at what are the key benefits of threat modeling. Now, the best thing that comes is the updated risk exposure. If you are not looking at threat modeling as a continuous process, you will not be current with what is happening in the threat world or the security world, which means the latest threats that are being exposed to by, for various organizations to look at. That is something you will miss out. So if you have continuous threat modeling as a process in the system, your risk exposure always is updated. Your risk profile, whether it is at an application level or a business level or organization level, is also very much updated. You can maintain it very up to date based on your threat modeling process. It reduces attack surface and promotes consistent security policy, which means the kind of attacks or the potence of the attack, it goes down consistently because we are already updated with the risk exposure and we understand where the risks come from. We are proactively looking at all the elements that are required from an organization perspective, not just limited to application code, so that we can address these as and when, even before they are moving into production. So that is something which also is a great advantage that comes from threat modeling as a key benefit. And it helps us mitigate risk enterprise wide, which means we have already seen types of threats we can look at, which essentially means we are looking at threats arising at an enterprise level, not just limiting ourselves to the application layer only. So it becomes holistic, gives us a systemic view of threats that could arise, mitigating the risk at an organization level, not just at an application level. And it also produces measurable security. That means you can define KPIs based on how many issues came out even post threat modeling, and you can use those KPIs to measure what is your current understanding of the security systems within the organization. That means how many issues are still being moved to production even after you have threat modeling in place, is something as a measurable KPI which we can look at. And security can be measured right throughout from the architecture phase up to the production phase of the life cycle. Align mitigation strategies with the budgets available. That means based on various elements of threats that you identify, you can prioritize, okay, these are the threats that we must address as part of our budgeting exercise itself. Many times we do come into scenarios where, as part of application security testing or penetration testing, some serious threats are highlighted, and we do hear from application teams or even businesses saying probably we didn't forecast enough budget for these because that was not a proactive element looked into from a security perspective. So it also helps us to align our budgets to the mitigation strategy that we have. It leverages real-time threat intelligence. Means because your risk exposure is always updated, that means you are current with the relevant threats available today in the system. Holistically, it makes that easier to look at potential threats that are arising from time to time in the system. Now, before we get to the continuous security blueprint, what we are doing in the organization as a whole from a threat modeling perspective, why we are looking at threat modeling to be implemented was, over a period of time, we have been concentrating on security and pen testing. And what we have seen, that irrespective of how many times we go back and identify the various issues out of these testings undertaken, the developer community more or less does not take it as a practice to address these issues more proactively, probably in the future releases. That means irrespective of the trainings we undertake, and also the element of issues that arise from the security and pen testings, dynamic static testings that we undertake, it is not becoming a culture for them to look at security as a proactive need even while they are developing the code or applications. So from that point of view, we looked at possibly threat modeling as an option, which means we are making it more proactive in the design stage itself, that these are the potential elements where the threats could come from. Now the developers are more forced to look at how you address these in your development stage itself. That means over a period of time, the issues that actually arise when we do undertake the dynamic and static testing within the system should potentially come down. And as it becomes a continuous process, the mindset of the whole technology teams would change, and it would develop that security to be built in as part of their development itself. And that is the biggest reason that we have looked at threat modeling to be as a process to be implemented, and we are looking at black duck as a tool to utilize for threat modeling. And that was the major need, because we were not able to bring down the issues and build that culture which is required as part of DevSecOps. Most of us look at DevSecOps ops to be implementing certain tools, basically to speed up or automate the testing that is happening in the CI/CD pipelines itself, but that essentially does not help build the culture. So threat modeling is one of the elements which will definitely contribute to building DevSecOps as a culture within the teams and the organizations. And this continuous security blueprint is driven by Mark Hornbeck in his book Engineering DevOps, and it provides a holistic view of security and how it can be implemented at various stages within an organization than only concentrate on development, build and testing, and deploying to production. So essentially, when we talk about even DevSecOps, most of the people are focusing on development effort and testing and then putting things into production or release management, how these are managed. But this continuous security blueprint covers all elements right from architecture planning up to the lifecycle management of an application. So a very good tool for us to look at and help organizations to actually implement DevSecOps in entirety. So that's essentially the core message of the talk as to what is threat modeling and why it is important for us to implement threat modeling in organizations, and what are the key benefits for us that we can derive from threat modeling as a whole, as an organization, and how it can help us build DevSecOps culture within the organizations with security built in mindset. So if you want to understand more about threat modeling or available methods, you can look at DevSecOps reference architectures or engineering DevOps blueprints, where you can get more information on these areas. So thanks for listening. So we'll look forward to connecting with you in future. Thank you.